Have you ever thought about how the month you were born might say something about who you are? Not in a horoscope kind of way. I'm talking about patterns, energy, the kind of stuff that shapes how you think, react, and show up in the world. Carl Jung, the guy who gave us things like archetypes and the collective unconscious, believed your birth month isn't random. It's part of a larger rhythm in nature, and that rhythm might show up in how you think, how you deal with emotions, and what kind of energy you naturally bring into the room, even if you've never noticed it before. So, here's what we're going to do. We'll walk through each month one by one. No lectures, no fluffy stuff. Just a real look at how your birth month might connect to certain traits, strengths, blind spots, and yeah, even a few surprises. So, let's talk about people born in January. There's a pattern I've noticed, and maybe you'll recognize it too. You don't rush. You think before you speak. And you probably get frustrated when people don't follow through. Sound familiar? That's not a random personality quirk. In Jungian terms, January is tied to the sage archetype, the observer, the planner, the quiet backbone of every team or family, who rarely makes noise but always keeps things from falling apart. You're probably the kind of person who grew up being called mature for your age. You might enjoy solitude more than small talk, and you like things to be structured not because you're boring, but because chaos is exhausting. Actually, someone once joked, "I don't hate parties. I just need the agenda 3 days in advance, a full food list, and my own quiet corner when I get there." That's peak January energy. Now, here's where it gets more interesting. This quiet nature. It's a serious strength. You're calm when others panic. You think long term. You don't just react. You observe, process, and respond. That makes you incredibly valuable in work and life. People like you tend to thrive in roles that require logic, systems, and consistency. Think data analysis, law, finance, operations, research, anywhere. Your ability to see the big picture and stick to a plan really counts. But that strength can turn into a wall. You might hold back too much, miss out on opportunities because you were waiting for the right time. Or maybe you keep everything inside to avoid bothering people. That can create distance, emotionally, socially, even professionally. And let's be real, the world doesn't always follow your timeline. When it doesn't, it can feel like things are spiraling, not because they are, but because it's not happening the way you imagined. If that builds up, the result is isolation. Overthinking, a loop of perfection and delay that keeps you stuck. You might become the person who works hard, stays reliable, but quietly wonders why no one really gets you. Sound harsh. Maybe, but also fixable. What helps is loosening the grip a bit. Letting go of the idea that everything needs to be ready, clear, or in control before you act. Try sharing more, even if it's messy. Accept help, even if they don't do it your way. And once in a while, allow something unexpected to unfold without fighting it. Doesn't mean you lose structure. It means you allow space for life to surprise you in good ways too. So, yeah, being a January person means carrying the sage energy-wise, steady, long-sighted. You might not be the loudest voice in the room, but chances are you're the one everyone turns to when it really matters. That's not a small thing. Just don't forget, even the wise need a little lightness now and then. All right, let's move on to February. If you were born this month, there's a good chance people around you have described you as different, maybe even a little ahead of your time. You probably think in angles others don't see. It's not that you're trying to be unique. You just can't help questioning how things work and imagining how they could be better. That's classic visionary energy. You don't really enjoy doing something just because that's how it's always been done. You need meaning, and more than that, you need freedom to explore. One guy I worked with, born in February, once told me, "I've changed jobs 3 times in 5 years. Not because I failed, I just kept finding something more exciting to build." That's pretty much the blueprint you're not afraid to shift when your mind or soul tells you it's time. And that mindset. It can be a serious advantage. You're creative. You're often the first in a group to spot what needs to change or improve. You're the person who starts conversations that others are afraid to. You naturally challenge assumptions, and you're not scared of shaking things up. These traits make you well suited for roles in design, innovation tech startups, education reform, basically anywhere. Ideas matter more than titles. When you're engaged, you light up the room, not with noise but with vision. But let's be honest, the same qualities can make daily life tricky. You can get frustrated easily when things move slowly, or when people say no just because they don't understand. It's easy to feel disconnected from groups or teams that don't work like you do. And while your mind jumps from one idea to the next, actually finishing something, that's a different challenge. You might find yourself full of ideas but low on results, not because you're lazy, but because your attention has already moved on to the next exciting thing. If that keeps going, here's what often happens: you end up feeling stuck in between. Too unconventional for traditional systems, but not grounded enough to build your own. Projects start strong, but fizzle. People see your potential, but don't always trust your follow-through. You might even start questioning yourself. Am I just scattered? Is something wrong with me? No, it's not wrong, but it does need balance. What helps choosing one idea to commit to, even if it means letting go of others? Having systems or people around you to help carry things through. And making peace with the fact that progress can be boring sometimes, but that doesn't mean you're in the wrong place. It just means you're doing the part that actually builds something real. So, February people carry the visionary energy full of potential challenge and the power to inspire change. You don't need to do things like everyone else. But once you figure out how to stay focused without losing that spark, you're unstoppable. So, let's talk about March. If you were born in this month, you probably know what it's like to feel things more deeply than most people around you. You sense change before it happens, in people, in places, even in the weather. You've probably gone through big shifts in your life that made you feel like a totally different version of yourself afterward. That's not random. That's what this archetype is about: the reborn. You're the kind of person who doesn't just survive change, you actually become someone new because of it. That inner reset button. You've hit it more than once. You don't necessarily like chaos, but you know how to use it. Emotionally, you're tuned in. It might take a while to understand what you're feeling, but once you do, you go deep, no surface stuff here. People might describe you as spiritual, artistic, maybe even a little mysterious. You're probably more private than open, and that's not a weakness. It's just how you protect your space. Actually, someone once told me, I've changed my hairstyle more times than I've changed phones, usually after a breakup. Another friend replied, let me guess, you were born in March. That pretty much sums it up. Reinvention is your thing. What's great about people like you is you don't get stuck easily. You know how to move through pain, and even when things hit hard, you come back stronger. You also tend to pick up on what others are feeling, which makes you a great listener, a solid friend, and someone people turn to when they need to be understood. You fit well in work that involves helping others through change therapy, creative work coaching, or even leadership roles during transitions. You're not scared of the mess. You know what comes after. But let's get real, that emotional sensitivity can turn on you if you're not careful. You might get overwhelmed, shut down, or pull away from people just to avoid absorbing too much. It's easy for you to drift into your own world, especially when you don't feel understood, and sometimes you try to fix others before you've sorted yourself out. If you're always reinventing, it can be hard for people to keep up with you. They might see you as unstable even when you're just evolving. What that leads to, if it goes unchecked, is disconnection. You might burn through friendships or jobs because you're chasing the next version of yourself, but never really landing anywhere. You could end up in loops, same patterns, same feelings, different places. The outside changes, but the inside feels stuck. And eventually that can turn into doubt, like maybe you're too much or too complicated, but you're not. You just need structure to go with your depth. You need boundaries for others and for yourself. Your feelings are real, but they're not meant to run the whole show. The more you learn to ground yourself while still honoring your emotions, the stronger you become. And once you figure out how to use your transformation energy on purpose to build something, to heal, to lead, You'll stop wondering if you're lost and start realizing you've just always been moving. That's what March is about. Not just surviving emotional storms, but becoming someone new after each one. You don't need to stop evolving. You just need to land once in a while. If you're born in April, let's just say waiting around probably isn't your thing. You're wired to move, to act, and to start things before most people have even decided what they want for lunch. That tendency. That's not random. It matches what's called the warrior or initiator archetype. You like momentum. When there's a problem, your first instinct isn't to overthink, it's to fix. You're probably that person in the group who says, "All right, I'll just do it because standing still feels worse than making a wrong move." You lean into challenges, you don't dodge them. You're intense when you care, and it shows. Someone I met, also born in April, once said, "I don't wait for the meeting to start. I start it." His team jokingly called him the launch button. It wasn't about ego. It was just that he couldn't stand inaction. That's very April. You have a presence, not because you try to lead, but because you're already moving and others follow. You bring drive to a room, the kind of energy that makes people stop hesitating. You're well suited for startups, new projects, or anything that needs someone to go first. You handle chaos better than stillness, and people often rely on your fire to get things moving. But here's the flip side. That fast reaction can also lead to burnout or conflict. You get frustrated when things don't move at your pace. People who take longer to decide might annoy you. You might push too hard and lose patience. And if you're always the one leading it, can feel like no one else ever steps up, or worse, like they slow you down. If that part goes unchecked, you might jump from one thing to the next, starting projects but never finishing. You might build tension in your team without meaning to, just by being too sharp or too fast. You could end up in leadership roles where people respect your power but keep their distance. And eventually you might burn out, not from lack of energy, but from carrying too much alone. That's why growth for you isn't about slowing down. It's about learning when to wait and when to act. Not everything needs a charge forward. Some things need a pause, a strategy. You don't need to take over every time something stalls. You just need to ask yourself, is this my battle, or can I guide someone else to lead? You're naturally built to start fires, but when you learn to control where that fire goes, it becomes something bigger. Not just action, but impact. Not just motion, but direction. That's what April's energy is, about the strength to lead and the wisdom to know when not to. If you're born in May, you probably have a strong preference for things that are stable, grounded, and real. You don't chase trends. You look for what lasts, whether it's routines, relationships, or work. And that's not a flaw. It fits the builder archetype. You like to build things slowly but solidly. That could mean actual construction, or just building a life where everything has its place. You're not in a rush because you don't see the point in doing something fast if it won't last. You probably enjoy predictable environments, not because you're boring, but because clarity helps you stay focused. Someone once joked that his friend born in May treated grocery shopping like a ritual. Same day, same list, same aisle order. When they changed the shelf layout, he said it threw off his entire week. And honestly, that makes sense if stability is part of your internal wiring. You're dependable. People trust you to show up, stay consistent, and finish what you start. You're often drawn to roles that involve patient structure or care things, like operations craftsmanship, caregiving, or anything that values consistency over chaos. You're the kind of person others lean on when everything else feels uncertain. Now the challenge is this. Your preference for what's known and familiar can turn into resistance to change. You might stick with something that no longer works just because it used to. You might delay necessary risks or reject new ideas too quickly. You could also become overly attached to comfort routines, possessions, or people even when they no longer help you grow. That resistance has consequences. You might miss opportunities that require stepping outside the familiar. You might struggle in fast-changing environments or feel overwhelmed when things shift too quickly. Sometimes you might even confuse stable with safe and avoid necessary discomfort just to keep the peace. So, Your development isn't about letting go of your grounded nature. It's about expanding what you can ground. You don't need to become a risk taker. You just need to recognize when your caution turns into fear. Growth for you means learning to adjust the structure without tearing it all down. Letting things evolve without feeling like you're losing control. You're good at building. And the best builders don't fear change, they use it. They keep the foundation strong, but allow the design to shift when it needs to. That's May. Solid, loyal, focused, and even stronger when you let life move with you. So, you were born in June. That already tells me a few things. People born this month usually move fast in thoughts and conversations, even in how they jump between interests. There's a restless, curious energy in you. It's not the kind that causes chaos. It's more like an open window in the mind, always looking out, always asking what else. Now, the core personality here is what we call the seeker. You're drawn to ideas, to experiences, to connections. You're not someone who can sit still for too long, especially not mentally. You want variety. You want stimulation. You probably enjoy jumping into conversations that stretch across 5 topics in 10 minutes, and somehow you still manage to follow all of them. And here's a moment you might relate to. Say, you walk into a bookstore just wanting to buy one book. 30 minutes later, you've explored psychology, cookbooks, business memoir, self-help, even flipped through a graphic novel, and then left without buying anything. Why not? Because nothing was good, but because too many things looked interesting. That's June energy in a nutshell. This kind of personality comes with real advantages. You're naturally great at connecting the dots, not just between ideas, but between people too. In a group setting, you're often the bridge, the one who pulls different perspectives together. You probably find yourself in environments like co-working spaces, creative hubs, community events, or projects that require a flexible thinker. And in careers, you shine in areas like communications, marketing, consulting, education, or even freelance work, where you're free to move between topics and styles. But of course, the strength can easily become the struggle. With so many ideas bouncing around, focus can be a challenge. You may start things with a lot of enthusiasm and then move on before they're finished. There's also the risk of being spread too thin, knowing a little about a lot, but not going deep in any one direction. When that happens, it can leave you feeling like you're always busy, but not getting anywhere. And here's where the real work comes in. If you're someone who's always on the go mentally, you've got to build habits that help you filter and focus. You don't need to slow down who you are, just get better at choosing where to invest your attention. Knowing when to say yes, and more importantly, when to say no, that's where your growth lives. Because you don't have a shortage of curiosity. What you need is clarity. You've got a sharp mind and a wide open view of the world. When you match that with direction and discipline, you stop being a wanderer and become a guide, not just for others, but for your own path. You know, when I talk to people born around this time of the year, there's something I notice quickly. You often become the person others turn to when they need comfort advice or just a quiet space to breathe. I'm not saying that to flatter you. It's just how your energy lands steady, warm, a bit quiet, but deeply present. You're not loud about what you feel, but you feel a lot. You absorb the mood of a room without trying. And when someone around you is going through something, even if they don't say a word, you pick it up. That emotional radar of yours. It's pretty sharp. You probably don't go out of your way to be the heart of a group, but somehow that's exactly where you end up. People feel safe around you. Maybe it's your calmness. Maybe it's that you don't judge. Or maybe it's just the way you sit there listening fully, like what they're saying really matters, because for you, it usually does. I remember a friend once said, "Don't ever get into a disagreement with someone. Born in July, they won't argue. They'll just look at you with those sad, disappointed eyes, and somehow you'll end up apologizing for something you didn't even do." It's funny, but also kind of true. You rarely shout, but you carry emotional weight in your silence. Now that sensitivity, it's a strength. It makes you loyal. It makes you dependable. And it's probably why you're great in roles where empathy matters. I'd expect to find you in places like schools, Therapy offices, community centers, anywhere. People need to be seen and heard, not just helped. You're the type who remembers small details about people, follows up later, and actually cares how someone's doing, not out of politeness, but because it bothers you not to know. But here's where things get tricky. When you're always tuned into everyone else's emotions, you can start losing track of your own. It's like you're carrying an invisible backpack filled with other people's problems. And after a while, that gets heavy. You might find yourself emotionally drained and not even realize why. And if you give too much without setting limits, you can start to feel unappreciated. That's when you pull back, quietly. Maybe you stop answering messages as fast. Maybe you stop offering help. But you don't explain why, and others rarely notice until you're long gone from the emotional space you once held for them. So, what's the lesson here? It's not about being less caring. It's about protecting the thing that makes you caring in the first place. Your emotional energy. That means setting boundaries, saying no sometimes, and understanding that being supportive doesn't mean being endlessly available. Let people show up for you too. You don't need to carry everyone. Just carry yourself well and let the rest be shared. That's when your presence stops being a quiet sacrifice and becomes a strong, clear gift. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and people just notice you. You're not doing anything special, but somehow the energy shifts a little. That's not a coincidence. There's something in the way you carry yourself, a kind of quiet authority, like someone who knows where they're going, even if you're still figuring it out inside. You tend to have a strong presence even when you're not trying. People often look to you to make decisions, set the tone, or take the lead. It's not about being bossy. It's more like others expect you to lead because you make them feel like things will be okay when you're in charge. And let's be honest, you usually enjoy that role. You like to move things forward, you like to have a vision, and you don't shy away from responsibility. I had a friend like you once who organized a road trip with 10 people. She picked the route, booked all the places planned, the snacks, and halfway through someone else in the group offered to help. Her response: "Sure, just double check with me after you do it." That's the vibe. Not because she didn't trust anyone, but because she felt responsible for everyone's experience. You probably get that. Now the upside of all this, you know how to make things happen. You don't wait around for someone else to step up. You're confident. When you talk, people listen. I'd expect to find you running your own business, leading a team, hosting events, or just being the one everyone turns to when stuff hits the fan. But here's the tricky part. When you're always the strong one, you can start to believe you have to be, even when you're tired. And when people don't appreciate your effort or question your choices, it can hit deeper than you admit. You might shut down emotionally, keep things to yourself, or pull away to protect that sense of pride that means so much to you. And yeah, control can sneak in too. You might take over things because it's faster, or get frustrated when others don't match your pace. Sometimes it's hard to let others lead even when they're ready. So, what's worth paying attention to? Let people meet you halfway. You don't always need to be the one holding the steering wheel. That doesn't make you less capable. It just makes you more human. And if someone has a different way of doing things, it's not always a threat. Sometimes it's just a new way forward. You already have the gift of presence. But when you balance that with humility, when you share power instead of protecting it, you don't just lead, you lift. That's when people don't just follow you, they believe in you. Come September now, I'll bet you're the kind of person who notices when a picture frame's slightly crooked, or when someone says, "Let's meet at 3" and shows up at 3:07. You might not say anything, but you definitely notice. That attention to detail, that's not just a habit. It's how your brain is wired. You tend to like things clear, structured, and well thought out. You're probably the one people go to when they need to make sense of something messy, whether it's a project plan, a cluttered calendar, or a group decision that keeps circling with no conclusion. You bring order, and honestly, that's a rare skill. I once worked with someone like you who color-coded everything on our team spreadsheet, not because she had to, but because she couldn't stand the chaos of inconsistent formatting. At first, we laughed. A week later, we all started doing it her way. Why? because it worked. Things just made more sense. That kind of clarity is your edge. You're reliable, thoughtful, and steady. I'd expect to find you behind the scenes, keeping things on track in places like accounting offices, research labs, planning departments, or any role that needs a calm thinker who can organize the chaos into something that runs. You might not crave the spotlight, but you're usually the reason things don't fall apart. But let's talk about what happens when that sharp mind of yours starts expecting too much from yourself or everyone else. You can push hard to get things just right and still feel like it's not enough. That voice in your head doesn't always know when to say, "Hey, this is good, let it go." And when other people are more laid back, you might feel like they're not serious or that you have to fix things on your own. That kind of pressure over time can wear you out. You may find it hard to rest or feel guilty for doing nothing, even when you need a break. And if something doesn't go as planned, you might take it more personally than anyone realizes. Here's the shift that helps: progress doesn't need perfection. Sometimes done is better than perfect. Letting things be a little messy isn't giving up control, it's making space to breathe. The more you allow room for flexibility, the less energy you spend managing every detail, and the more freedom you have to enjoy the bigger picture. You already have a gift for seeing what others miss. Just remember that not everything needs fixing. Some things just need space to unfold. October, if that's your birth month. You probably hear this a lot. You're so easy to talk to, or you're the one keeping the group together. That's not a coincidence. October-born people often carry the energy of what I'd call the diplomat or the artist. Your natural vibe brings peace, balance, and beauty into the space around you sometimes, without you even trying. You have this quiet superpower, sensing tension before it fully forms. You know when someone's uncomfortable, even if they're smiling, and without thinking too much, you often step in, smooth things out, and make people feel heard. But you don't do it just to please, it's more like you can't help it. Harmony feels like oxygen to you. Let me give you a quick example. Imagine you're at a dinner party. Two friends are arguing about something stupid, pineapple on pizza or something. Everyone else is awkwardly staring at their drinks. You crack a joke, shift the topic, and within 2 minutes people are laughing again. Crisis averted. But later you realize you didn't even get to finish your own thought in that conversation. You were too busy balancing the room. That kind of balancing act, it shows up everywhere. At work, in friendships, even with strangers. People tend to come to you when they want someone neutral, someone who will listen without judging. And you're good at that. Really good. You're also probably the person with the nicest taste in clothes playlists or home decor. There's usually some kind of aesthetic awareness in you, even if you don't think of yourself as artistic. Now, let's talk about where you naturally fit in. You do well in places where emotional intelligence is a core skill. Client relationships, design, negotiation, therapy, conflict, resolution. Also anywhere beauty matters. You're the kind of person who can walk into a messy situation and make it feel calm, or at least human. You create space. That's a gift. But of course, every strength has a flip side. And for you, it's this: you care so much about keeping the peace, sometimes you forget about your own boundaries. You avoid conflict to the point where it becomes emotional avoidance. And over time, that can build up. You might feel like you're always adjusting for other people, but nobody's adjusting for you. That kind of quiet imbalance can turn into resentment or just plain exhaustion. You might also struggle with decision-making, not because you don't know what you want, but because you're too aware of how every choice will affect everyone else. So you hesitate or you keep things vague just to keep things smooth. Here's the real work: learning to keep your sense of harmony without losing your voice. It's okay to let someone be disappointed. It's okay if not everyone agrees. That doesn't mean you failed. That just means you're human, and so are they. Your challenge isn't about being less kind or less thoughtful. It's about not letting that kindness erase you. That's October. Diplomatic, aesthetic, emotionally tuned in. Just don't forget that harmony outside means nothing if it costs you harmony inside. If you were born in November, you're probably used to people saying you're hard to read. That's not a flaw, that's just part of your design. People born in November tend to carry the energy of what I'd call the Alchemist or the Deep Transformer. What does that mean for you? You're someone who doesn't take things at face value. You want to know what's really going on. You want to understand people patterns, emotions, especially the things most people avoid. You're not loud, you observe, you process, and often when others are still reacting, you've already figured out the real issue. That makes you valuable in any situation where clarity matters. You're not scared of discomfort. In fact, you often walk straight into it because that's where transformation happens. It's like you were born with an instinct for evolution, especially your own. I once had a colleague born in November who would regularly disappear for weeks emotionally, He'd get quiet, pull away. Everyone would wonder what was going on. Then he'd come back suddenly with a new mindset, a new plan, sometimes even a whole new career path. We called it his Phoenix cycle. It happened so often that we just rolled with it. That's the thing November-born people go through these personal reinventions more than most. And they usually come out stronger. Now, where do people like you naturally show up? Think roles where depth, insight, and emotional intelligence are non-negotiable. You'll find November-born types in therapy offices, research labs, spiritual work, shadowy parts of the creative world, even investigative journalism. Anywhere people are asking, what's really going on here, you'll fit right in. And you're usually not after recognition, you're after meaning. But let's talk about the harder part. When your strength is going deep, it's easy to lose the surface. You might isolate. You might overthink to the point of paralysis. You might feel disconnected from people who only want to talk about the weather. If you're not careful, that inner world of yours can become a trap. And not everyone around you understands that kind of processing. Some people see it as cold or distant, when really it's just you trying to metabolize what you feel. And because you often feel things so intensely, you've probably learned to hide it. But bottling that up doesn't protect you forever. It just delays the breakdown. That's why your biggest lesson is, this transformation is powerful, but it needs connection. You don't have to go through every dark tunnel alone. The work for you isn't to be lighter or shallower. That's not your lane. The work is to trust that others can meet you in the deep end if you let them. You're not here to carry every heavy truth by yourself. You're here to help others face their own. That's November. Quiet but intense. Private but powerful. A born transformer. You carry the kind of energy that doesn't just adapt, it rebuilds. Just make sure you don't rebuild alone. All right, let's wrap this up with December, the final month, and definitely not the least interesting. If you were born in December, you're probably the kind of person who's always thinking ahead. Not just next week, 5 years from now, maybe even further. You talk about big ideas, long-term goals, or life philosophies like it's casual small talk. People might say you live in the clouds, but really you're just wired to see the bigger picture. You carry what we'd call the energy of the visionary sage. You're curious, idealistic, and surprisingly optimistic for someone who's seen some of the darker sides of life. But don't get it twisted, you're not naive. You just believe that things can be better, and you want to help move them in that direction. You thinking, why not? While everyone else is stuck in, that's just the way it is. I once worked with a guy born in December who was always coming up with ideas for improving the company. Like every Monday, he had a new revolutionary system to propose. Inspiring, yes. Confusing. Also yes, especially when he forgot we had a meeting at 9 and he was still at the cafe, writing a blog post about how AI would reshape education. Classic December energy. Now, where do people like you naturally show up? Think spaces that value vision, freedom, and wisdom. You'll find December-born types in education and consulting, coaching, thought leadership, nonprofit strategy, or working remotely from a cabin while writing a book. You're drawn to places that let you think freely and make a broad impact. And people tend to come to you when they're looking for guidance, not because you know everything, but because you know how to think through anything. But let's talk about the flip side. You dream big, but sometimes you skip the part where you have to deal with, reality. Daily routines can feel like a trap. Structure might annoy you. You can get so wrapped up in ideas that you forget to actually do something with them. Worst case scenario. You sound inspiring, but nothing changes. You plan a lot, but execute very little, and that can backfire. You start to feel disconnected, maybe even disappointed, because life isn't matching the ideal version in your head. That's when the bitterness can creep in, and your wisdom starts turning into criticism of yourself, of others, or of the world in general. So, here's the work. Don't stop dreaming. That's your gift. But learn how to bring your ideals down to earth. Start small. Stay grounded. Choose one idea and see it through, even when it's not perfect. You're not here to be flawless. You're here to inspire change by living it, not just talking about it. That's December, the thinker, the teacher, the visionary. You carry the end-of-year energy that reflects and reimagines. Just remember, the future you see can't exist unless you help build it one step at a time. All right, we've walked through all 12 months. And whether you were born in the cold of January or the heat of August, what matters isn't the label, it's the insight. None of this is meant to box you in. It's not about who you should be. It's just a way to notice patterns you might have overlooked and maybe make better sense of why you think, feel, or react the way you do. What you do with this isn't up to the month you were born, it's up to you. You can ignore it, reflect on it, or use it as a lens to get clearer on where you're strong, where you get stuck, and where you're still growing. That's the point. Not prediction, not identity, but awareness. Because once you're aware, you get to choose. And choice. That's where change begins. So whatever your month, whatever your path, you've got the map. Now it's your move. All right, we've walked through all 12 months. And whether you were born in the cold of January or the heat of August, what matters isn't the label, it's the insight. None of this is meant to box you in. It's not about who you should be. It's just a way to notice patterns you might have overlooked and maybe make better sense of why you think, feel, or react the way you do. What you do with this isn't up to the month you were born. It's up to you. You can ignore it, reflect on it, or use it as a lens to get clearer on where you're strong, where you get stuck, and where you're still growing. That's the point. Not prediction, not identity, but awareness. Because once you're aware, you get to choose. And choice, that's where change begins. So, whatever your month, whatever your path, you've got the map. Now it's your move.